Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan Miller Report on SHR Media and Public Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Tuesday, April the 28th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller. Corey Evan in just a moment tonight, and our special guest, Lonnie Poindexter of Urban Families, the Freedom Journal radio show, will join us. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special program in regards to Baltimore. We are interrupting our regular programs tonight, and our regular rundown, as we do on the Evan Miller Report, to talk about this special issue of what is going on in Baltimore, what we Americans need to do, how this situation is affecting Americans. First, we're going to be starting off with a report from the ITV News' Robert Moore, who is in Washington and was in Baltimore earlier today for the latest on in the region. Following that, we'll be reading a report from Major League Baseball on how the Baltimore Orioles will be canceling their game, and for the first time, their fans will not be able to see a game inside the Baltimore Stadium. More on that in a moment, but first, let's go to the ITV News' Robert Moore. He has the latest now from Baltimore.
Now it is Baltimore's turn to witness the fury and frustration of its young black community. And as elsewhere, the police are the target. Yes, there is criminality on the streets, not least looting and arson. But this is also a community protesting at the way Baltimore is policed. In this largely African-American city, virtually all the officers we see on the streets are white. The initial trigger of all this unrest is the unexplained death of Freddie Gray, a young black man seen here 2 weeks ago being taken into police custody. A shocked mayor is now left pleading for calm.
This is one of our darkest days as a city, and I know that we're much better than this. We know that the world is watching, and we cannot allow our city to devolve into chaos.
And yet overnight, chaos there was, with the police losing control and buildings set ablaze, including this nearly complete church-funded centre for the elderly, triggering despair, but also from the man whose project it was, resilience.
That we're going to rebuild again.
Bigger and better.
And we're going to come back stronger.
Coming back.
At one point, this woman was berating and slapping her hooded son for being involved in the trouble. With the police on the defensive, parents are taking law enforcement into their own hands. The question is whether the deployment of specialized police units and the National Guard will make a difference, or must urban America brace itself for a tumultuous summer of race riots. This afternoon, the president condemned the violence, but said Americans should not be surprised.
But I think we as a country have to do some soul searching. This is not new. It's been going on for decades.
Baltimore is now the center of national concern, with military helicopters in the skies above this Maryland city, police reinforcements on the ground, and a curfew being imposed through the night to prevent any further confrontations. Robert Moore, ITV News, Baltimore.
Thanks to Robert Moore for that report, and we should note over 200 people were arrested last night as the situation worsened overnight, and on top of it, the situation is worse as the mayor announced that the curfew that wasn't supposed to go into effect until tonight made the situation, I think, somewhat worse tonight. At least that's my opinion. Another note to this today, historical in this regard, due to the ongoing riots and protests in the city of Baltimore, the Chicago White Sox and Baltimore Orioles that were supposed to be playing yesterday, today, and tomorrow, that whole series has been canceled. First time in Major League Baseball history this has happened. Tomorrow's game that was supposed to be happening will still happen, but no fans will be in the stadium, and only people will be able to see the game via local regional television service on their local RSNs, or listening to radio, or nationally on MLB.TV. On top of this, the upcoming game for this weekend with the Tampa Bay Rays will now be relocated from Baltimore over to Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Florida, where Baltimore will be the home team in Tampa Bay. And quite historic in that regard. Here to talk about the ongoing situation in Baltimore and for analysis of this situation is Lonnie Poindexter. He is the host of Urban Family Talks, the Freedom's Journal radio show. His show talks about the depth of look at effects of the liberal ideology of the African American community, and also talks sound biblical principles that point our community back to a moral and free society. Good evening, Lonnie.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on your show.
A pleasure having you with us. You and I'm quite a big fan of yours, listening to you on the Exceptional Conservative Show week in and week out. So I'm glad Ken was able to get me in contact with you, Lonnie, in regards to this. Now, of course, you've been on with Ken many a times talking about these numerous issues, whether it has to do with the situation with Michael Brown in Ferguson that happened, situation with that man in New York who had that situation with police. Now we have this in Baltimore. What's your thoughts on this? How can we as Americans handle this? We heard President Obama say in that report with Robert Moore that America needs to do soul searching. Is the president right about this, or is the president coming around about this the wrong way?
Well, you've heard me mention this on Ken's show many times, and I do as well with my own show, that we know the president loves to play the race card when it's politically expedient for him to do so. The real issue is we don't know exactly what happened and what took place in Baltimore any more than we knew what took place in Ferguson until all the evidence was in. So I've been admonishing my listeners and to the community in general that what they need to do is they need to stand down, to use a term that's probably being used often now, and wait until the evidence is in. But, we have what I call the passionately misinformed, which takes very little provocation to go out and turn over cars and throw bricks through windows and bricks and things at police officers. And it's such a sad state to see young males out doing this when I come from a generation where there was paternal influence in the lives of young men so that you wouldn't have that taking place. So I might be getting a little ahead of the story, but if you look at the case of the mother, Tanya, who took it upon herself to deal with her son, who she found out was out there throwing rocks at cops and what have you, and she took care of that young man, and that particular video clip is going viral, and you see it on all the news sources now.
Absolutely, you bring up Tanya, and you know what? I was watching local news here out of our newsroom bureau right before the show tonight, and you're right. She is all over. She was on The View this morning, and not often do I agree with the current influential Whoopi Goldberg on anything. But this morning,
I agree.
I'm agreeing with this woman. Shame on these young men, these teens, for going out of school and starting all this hate and discontent. Okay, and you're right. This investigation, it's far from over. It's just beginning. We don't fully understand what happened to Freddie Gray. I stated on my program yesterday, and I continue to state today, Lonnie, went to the audience yesterday after we played that news conference with the mayor, Stephanie Rawlings, yesterday. Hey, we're coming at this with a view. We don't know fully what's going on here. We're going to let the police department do their full investigation. But with what we've seen in Baltimore, they don't want a full investigation. So, Lonnie, take us into the mind of these young kids and some of these rioters over there. Take it into their mind. What exactly do they want? Do they want, and I don't mean to be racist in any way, But do they want a fully African-American police department? Because at least some news reports, and if you listen to the likes of MSNBC, Rachel Mandel will suggest to her audience on a day in and day out, hey, Baltimore is a full white police force. No Hispanics, no African-Americans. How can we talk and change the narrative to this?
Well, as I understand it, there are black Americans in positions of leadership within the police department, just like they had that in Ferguson as well. I don't think that's the issue. And if it is, let's say it is the issue, there are ways of going about making changes in your community. Hey, I think what's going on is this. We have our president who likes to stir the pot and play the race card. I looked at what I think they're ultimately looking to do is use any event that takes place nationally to give it national exposure as to here again is another opportunity of black males being lorded over by white police cops. Because at the end of the day, they want national oversight over policing in our cities and our counties across the nation. Policing has always been a local activity so that you, the citizen of that community, if you don't like the policing that you have, get a police chief elected or appointed or get lawmakers or mayors and so forth put in place and change things if you don't like the makeup. You don't go out and throw bricks and bottles at cops and throw them through windows and loot businesses. Let me give you a quick illustration that explains the plight of a populace that's completely misinformed but passionate about what they think they're standing for. I saw a pic yesterday of a young man who had looted a CVS pharmacy there in Baltimore. And he's standing out, and there's a photograph, and maybe you've seen this. He's holding up a bag of a big 24-pack of toilet tissue, and he's got this big cheese-eating grin on his face as if he's hit the lottery. So if your state in life is that you feel much better about yourself because you stole a pack of 24 rolls of toilet tissue, and it's going to make things better for you in life, that speaks to, I think, the broader sense of what's going on in those communities. Oh, and by the way, let me mention this. Those communities, by and large, have been run by liberals for the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah, and you know what? Interesting. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings, very new to this job. She was known as the 1970s, 1980s hippie chick, and she managed to get in office. And my goodness, her words came back to bite her because she said she incited this. I believe I'm going as far to say she incited this, and I believe this is an impeachable offense for the mayor of Baltimore right now. What do you think should be done with her? She should be held to account with this because she's the one who told the police department to stand down.
Yeah, she's not unlike that meme you see out in social media that shows a picture of Al Sharpton standing in front of a city burning, and he's got a gas can in his hand. He says, "I'm here to help." Yeah.
And Jesse Jackson was there too. You see the situation, then all of a sudden you see Jesse Jackson, you see Al Sharpton coming in, and Al Sharpton, of course, not new to this whole thing. Of course, we remember James O'Keefe's exclusive report here on the Evan Miller Report. He broke it on our program that the likes of Michael Brown's family and Trayvon Martin's family, who had similar issues with race issues, we're making money out of this. So, my goodness, Look it's another moneymaker for the likes of the Rainbow Push Coalition and Al Sharpton's group as well, coming in there and making the money. And you know what the funny thing is? Francis Gray's parents, they know what this situation is. They didn't want this to happen. They wanted a nice, quiet funeral for their son. They didn't want this media glamour. They didn't, or the media highlighting them. They didn't want these protests to happen. They didn't even want a walk to happen, per se. And I feel for these poor parents who have to put up with this.
Yep, and it's, the appearance with the gentleman, I believe, Walker in North Carolina that died recently, and his parents were bold enough to state that they did not want Messrs. Sharpton or Jackson anywhere near them concerning the incident that took place in, I believe, was Charleston, North Carolina. So, some parents figure it out and they don't want them around. Other parents are overwhelmed by the grief, and these particular, if I can call them vultures or ambulance chasers, is probably a better name, who come to stir the pot, and that's how they make their money. They become multi-millionaires because this is their chief stock in trade. But I want to tell you something. There is a burgeoning black conservative community that I'm a member of, and we figured this stuff out years ago. Black Americans know those guys are charlatans. Unfortunately, you're not going to get MSNBC, the alphabet soup of networks out there to cover those individuals to get their side of a story. They want to continue to stir the pot because, as I'm sure you know, media's chief stock and trade is sensationalism, especially the left-leaning media.
It's disturbing to say the least. Corey was mentioning right before we went to air, a couple months before we went to air with you there, Lonnie, about the tragedy of this CVS pharmacy being burned down. What did these people at CVS do to them? Do to them? There was a brand new home for the elderly just built. That was mentioned in our report with the ITV News' Robert Moore tonight. What do these people do to you? How can we handle this? And you know what? This hasn't been something that all of a sudden just happened. This has been going on for decades. The last time that we had a situation in Baltimore, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, was back in the 1960s. When we had a situation over in Baltimore, such as this. We haven't seen it this bad before.
No, well, going back to my previous statement, in those communities, when you've had years and years of liberal leadership that drive the jobs from the region and drive opportunities for work, housing being negatively impacted, and then so they're looking for somebody to point the finger at, and they say, well, it's got to be because, and let me just point this, I said this on my radio show this morning, this is not 1955 or 1965 or even 1975. It's 2015. We have a president who was twice elected by a predominance of Americans who did not happen to be black, since black Americans are only about 12 to 13% of the population. We need to get over this race baiting. And I think people are waking up to it, but you do have a subset of the population in the black community that's misinformed, they're ignorant of the issues, and they're easily manipulated. So we need the leaders in the community to take a stand, and I'm working with me across the country in the work that I do, primarily in the faith-based community as clergy that are looking to reach out to those communities and say, hey, there's another way. There's another way if you want to bring about change, and we need to wait, and we need to be patient to understand what's truly going on and not be so easily manipulated by the status quo that happens to be way to the left.
How can we correct this issue over in Maryland? It's interesting. This is 40 miles away from the White House. 90 miles, really, if you're looking into the heart of Washington, D.C., as Ken was reporting on last night's program. How can we come in there and do this? Baltimore being the top-notch one of the top-notch police departments here in the nation. They could have had a handle on this. They had a 40,000-plus police department here. They could have handled this. It's costing them millions, if not billions of dollars in damage. It's going to cost the taxpayers, I'm speaking federal taxpayers, more money on this, adding more money to the federal deficit because of some stupid kids who, I will say that some parents aren't keeping an eye on because obviously the kids are just jumping out, abandoning school, jumping out, and starting up a bunch of trouble.
Roving bands of unsupervised male youth is the core of the issue, running around like wolf packs because there's no paternal oversight over them, and that's what you have. But when you have the breakdown, I don't know if you're aware of the statistic, in urban communities across America, which is code for black or Latino, the statistic for the black urban communities today nationally averages, depending on what city, anywhere from 70% up to southeast Washington, D.C., 89% of those communities, single parent, typically female head of household. So there's no male role models in the home anymore. The bull elephants aren't there. Bull elephants keep peace in the herd. If there's no bull elephant there, the adolescent males run amok. Same thing happens in nature, in the game preserves in Africa. So that's what needs to take place, and you can pretty much calm this whole thing down by what? Let me just say this: get government out of the family and allow the family to be what it's supposed to be. And this is a non-issue, regardless of the racial climate, because there was a time when black Americans had true second-class citizenship in America, that you never heard about these incidences taking place.
You know, I had no idea that the situation in Baltimore was going to happen. Obviously, this funeral was on Sunday, Lonnie, but over the weekend, I happened to watch a movie that was quite historical of its time, Driving Miss Daisy. Of course, we remember the time that this happened. So I'm watching this movie. I'm just being a casual watcher, looking for a good movie to watch off my Netflix over the weekend. And Morgan Freeman starred in it, of course, and Jessica Taver's in there. And, and watching this, we're hearing the historical times of Martin Luther King speaking in this, surrogation. We saw the things of African Americans only be surrogated to use their own set of bathrooms or having to wait outside at certain events there. But it's like, then this Baltimore thing happened. It's like I said, wow. I hate to say this, but it seems like the African American community, they were treated a bit better during those times than what they feel they're being treated now. And I hate to say it, I was having a discussion with someone walking around in a grocery store yesterday, and he was very profound in what he said. You know what? The community did this to themselves. They did this to themselves. We didn't do it to them. They allowed this to happen to themselves. They allowed it to happen with their lifestyle, with the way they live, with the misdoing of what they do in their lives, misspending, bad decisions, and the lack of a father in the household. Latest statistics say African American households are the ones with the least amount of fathers involved in their kids' lives.
Yeah, the statistic, if you think entitlement programs from the Johnson administration in 1964-65, when those programs were signed into existence, the black family was 70+% intact, two-parent households. Dad was in the home. After that legislation was passed, and this dovetails into the civil rights movement, which were the things that allowed blacks to gain first-class citizenship. But the entitlement programs destroyed the inner city. That's what you're saying. And so you've got 50 years where you've had the father systematically removed from the home based on choices made within the black community because of the programs that allowed you to get free cheese, to put it mildly. And so what you have today is systemic breakdown in our communities. I deal with it day in and day out because I work with clergy across the country. They're where the rubber meets the road, at the grassroots level, trying to stem the tide of the onslaught. Yet you have administrations in power today that still want to blame things based on the false narrative. The white man did not put the young males that exist in that community today in the state that they're in. The breakdown of the family. Now, the government contributed to it because of the programs. Well, that's based on a whole other agenda and another show that happens to dovetail into what they're trying to do to America, which is redefine it. If you break the black family first, it doesn't take long.
It is disturbing. With the current situation right now, was it the right thing for the governor of Maryland to call in the National Guard to declare what I'm calling martial law over there? And is the situation now being handled correctly, you think, Lonnie? And if you disagree with that, how do you think it should be handled?
Well, I think it wasn't handled correctly to beginning, and then they end up doing what they have to do now. Why did they stand down when it first started? I saw the same things with the Rodney King riots in Los Angeles, where they let the city burn for a night and not do anything when they could have squelched this thing from the beginning with a handful of young people with nothing else to do and sent them back home. But they did not do that, and then the horrible comments from the mayor of Baltimore, who is now backpedaling on that statement, the damage is done. And so now the National Guard has been called in. It's the momentum is built, and this is turning into another Ferguson. So, they might call me a conspiracy theorist, but what I see, and I'm watching across this nation, is there seems to be this trend now to get national oversight over local police departments, and then what I see is nationalized police force at some point, and then using this as the agenda based on racial tension in America between blacks and whites. And it's a joke because, like I said prior, Barack Obama was elected twice by white Americans. We're only 13% of the population. I'm a black male in America. There's not enough black Americans to get him elected. White America, along with a whole lot of other people, elected him twice. So we're in a post-racial America. I get a lot of rocks thrown at me for making that statement, but there is no excuse for not succeeding today if you're given half a chance in America. Not against you at home, but there's certain people that overcome as well. That's why the church is there. Dr. Ben Carson is a perfect example of being able to overcome in spite of your circumstances if you use morality, keep your nose to the grindstone, stay focused on your goals, and ignore this peripheral BS. But if you have a victim's mentality and you're easily manipulated, not say, I blame the young for making poor choices, but I understand how they're so easily manipulated. They come through the public schools, and the public schools have dumbed down a generation of people.
Okay, yeah, public schools. We talked about this on this program plenty of times. I want to go directly. You mentioned the churches, and I don't think we talk about this enough, Lonnie. I think the churches are at fault with this because you take the social policy, you take the responsibility policy, because you have pastors. At least remember back growing up in church when you had the pastor coming out and it was teaching you right from wrong. Okay, it's bad to steal. It's bad to write. It's bad to do crime. Thou shalt not steal. Part of the Ten Commandments, right? Right now, these preachers in these prominent black churches that are so very popular are more concerned about money clicking in the offering plate than sitting these parents down, whether it be the mother or the father, because sometimes it's a single father or a single mother there, and, sitting this congregation down and saying, hey, you see what's going on here? You see what's going on here? You see this is wrong? Why aren't the churches doing this? Why isn't the church being more involved in this and saying, hey, you got to straighten this thing out, or your kid's going to be in jail?
It's called tribalism. It's when, because someone looks like you have to side with them instead of judging a person based on their values. And, the Bible explicitly states that it's values that determine your brethren, not ethnicity. So we have today and I don't want to generalize and say the entire black church community, because certainly it's not all of them. I work with many churches across the country that have a worldview.
Right, just the minority
you
of
have
those churches.
Yeah, what you have is why are not the big churches stepping up and getting involved? You've got mega black churches that have a lot of influence, but you stated something earlier that I wanted to point out. My dad always taught me, he said, follow the money, son. He said, if you want to know the intent of a thing, find out where the money comes from, and it'll let you know. And a lot of these churches today that are quiet on these types of issues, except to reinforce the false narrative, is because their coffers are being filled by organizations that have a different worldview to you and I. And just to point out the fact, many churches get donations from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood has effectively cut the black population in half in 42 years, yet our president is called their champion, and black churches today work hand in hand with Planned Parenthood. Explain that to me when 70+% of Planned Parenthood are located in black communities within 2 miles walking distance from the black community. And in 42 years, as I stated, we've been cut in half. You have nearly 18 million black babies have been aborted since Roe v. Wade. Wow. That's genocide.
Yeah, it is. Really. And you know what? That's funny you bring up that word genocide, because you know what? We have our liberal politicians here talking about the situations in Darfur, over in the Sudan. Wait a minute. Why do we need to be giving aid over to Africa? What happened to helping our own at home? Look at the population being cut in half here at home. We got our own genocide here happening at home. This is beyond ridiculous to me. And of course, then it goes to that classic 10 Commandment in the Bible: "Thou shalt not kill." So
Yep.
So now we have a portion. I'm not saying all, but we have a portion of these African American or black churches, to be politically correct or not in this situation, mega churches, mind you, endorsing the likes, getting this money from the Planned Parenthood and allowing this genocide to continue to happen.
Money does strange things to people. I talk to clergy all the time, and some who don't agree with me, and ask them privately, they will agree with me, but they will not come out in public and come against the agenda that goes forth from the left on this, because Black Americans identify with liberal culture, although liberal culture is what's destroying our communities. But folks are waking up. I'm encouraged. The radio show that I host daily speaks across the nation to that part of the community that has figured out that something's not quite right. They're no longer bamboozled, if they ever were in the first place, and they've just been looking for pulpits, if I can use that term, or a soapbox to stand on and say the truth, and find like-minded people across the country. I know pastors who are very conservative in their views, but they're part of congregations that are, they're part of denominations that are very liberal. At the senior decision makers at the organizations, the head of the organizations. And so we've got all that going on as well, but it's going to turn around. It has to, because we're on life support in the Black community. The urban centers are in dismal shape. If you want to see what's going to happen across the nation, is headed toward Baltimore and Chicago and other cities. Just look at Detroit.
Oh, yeah.
Just look at Detroit.
Well, you know what?
And let me just say.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
I was just saying, I can see what happened in Baltimore happening in Washington, D.C.
And you mentioned Chicago, too. And you know what? I know people in Chicago. I know a very predominant news anchor, who I can't mention his name just because of privacy reasons and all that, who anchors a newscast in Chicago during prime time over there. And night after night in Chicago, we see these murders happen. We see the gangs. I hear it happening in the South Loop or down on the north side of Chicago. It happens. It's happening every night. It used to happen quite a bit in Los Angeles. I think it's starting to happen again in Los Angeles. And then, God forbid, something happens in Oakland. Oh boy, you got a big situation in Oakland. Then it's like, we get a situation out of Oakland at least once a year, Lonnie, when something happens over there. And oh boy, you want to get out of there at the city of Oakland real quick, because you don't want to be caught in the middle of one of those. Tell me.
You certainly don't.
And I know we're running out of time, and I know your time is valuable. So tell me what your program on the Urban Family Conservative Network and your program, the Freedom Journal's radio show. Tell me what's your radio show and what's your message on what you're trying to do to repair the likes of the African American community from the likes and the effects of this liberal ideology, as you have stated.
Our mission is chiefly to aggregate the Black conservative community so that they have a portal in which they can go to find like-minded individuals, so we can build a constituency to push back on this foolishness. The only way things are going to change is you take the constituency that you build and build political clout and get officials elected and people elected that have your worldview. Secondly, is to inform the public about the truth, because history is being rewritten. The history about America and what America is has been changed because of this agenda that comes from the left. And so we push materials, and we have subject matter experts that come on the show. We sponsor conferences and so forth that speak to the truth of the history of this nation, and so that people understand that the issues of the day are not what they're saying that they are. Black Americans is not suffering today because of slavery. Black America had rebounded during Reconstruction, even though second-class citizenship, and had intact communities up until the mid-1960s going into the early 70s. So the boogeyman in the room is nanny government. And we're trying to get government out of the Black family and allow the male to be placed back in his rightful place. And as I stated earlier, when the bull elephant is there, there's peace in the herd.
Absolutely right on what you're doing. I'm glad you're out there and doing it. There's very few people like you out there, Lonnie, who are actually coming out and speaking on this. And, I heard Ken. Ken was very profound in what he said last night on the Exceptional Conservative show, that when you have the likes of Juan Williams coming out on Fox News and saying that this is wrong, and you have the likes of even Whoopi Goldberg coming out on The View and saying, shame on you, well, there has to be a message somehow being sent out there. So even some of the liberals are starting to understand what's going on now.
I would agree. Somebody needs to send a message to 1600 Pennsylvania.
It's about time, I would say.
Yeah, that's sure, right on there, Corey. So, I would, Lonnie, I would love to see if you can contact Whoopi Goldberg and say, hey, we agree on something here, Whoopi. Why don't we use The View? Why don't we combine our forces together? See if we can repair this, what you say is this frayed relationship. And I agree, it is a frayed relationship between what we have here in America, between the African American community. And I'm not going to spread blame around. That isn't going to help any. But I will state as forward as possible here, Lonnie, that hey, we need to do something here, because we don't do something here, well, we're going to turn out like most of these countries over in Africa. Look at Boko Haram taking over in Nigeria. We don't want to turn out like those poor schoolgirls who were taken over by the likes of that Boko Haram.
I agree. Or much worse, we could end up like France, right?
Oh, jeez, yeah.
with no go zone.
Yeah, Islamic phobia, as the liberals would say, over in France. Yeah, the Islamic people are taking over in France, and they're starting to take over in the UK too. I watch those bulletins out of the UK every day. It's getting worse every day.
So much for the City of Lights.
Yeah, really. Lonnie, before we let you go, tell people where they can listen to your program day in and day out.
We broadcast Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. Central until 12 p.m. Until 1 p.m. And you can catch us every day at that time on urbanfamilytalk.com. That's urbanfamilytalk.com. And it's the Freedom's Journal radio show. I am the host. And we're on 7 terrestrial radio stations, primarily in the east. We go as far west as Boise, currently soon to have 8 stations, and we're also IP-enabled over the internet. You can catch us nationally there.
All right, sounds great, Lonnie. Folks, make sure to check out the Freedom Journal's radio show. Get the latest on what is going on in the African-American community and the latest on the fight against liberal ideology in that community. Lonnie Poindexter, thanks so much for coming on the Evan Miller Report for an extended interview tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
All right, pleasure as always. And we'll be right back after these messages.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
In a moment, cancer changed our lives forever.
We were told nothing could be done to enjoy these final moments together.
But in that moment, when all seemed lost,
St. Jude Children's Research Hospital gave us hope.
Because at this moment, St. Jude Children's Research Hospital is saving lives with pioneering research and care. We're changing the way the world treats childhood cancer by sharing our discoveries with doctors and scientists everywhere.
And we'll never have to pay St. Jude for anything, ever.
At this moment, she wants to be in her own bed.
I want to be back at school with my friends.
I want to be outside playing.
Please take a moment and join St. Jude in finding cures and saving children. Visit stjude.org.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Welcome back to the Evan Miller Report. I'm Corey Evan. Jason Miller will be back in just a few short moments with an update on the rescue situation. Schoolgirls in Nigeria being rescued tonight. But first, Katie Medley, the first witness to testify in the Colorado theater shooting trial, said she thought her husband was dead after he was shot in the head, but then noticed he was breathing. She said police opened the exit door and screamed for people to come outside. She told her friend Ashley Kurz that she had to make a decision about whether to leave or stay with her husband, and she decided to leave to make sure their unborn baby would survive. A former boxing coach of Boston Marathon bomber Dzhokhar Tsarnaev's late brother says Tsarnaev was, quote, like a puppy following his brother. The defense called John as a witness Tuesday in the sentencing phase of Tsarnaev's trial. Karan said Tamerlan had some success as an amateur boxer when he was a teen. He said Dzhokhar, who was then 10 or 11, came to gym twice with Tamerlan, and the two brothers appeared to have a close relationship. His lawyers have argued that Tamerlan was the mastermind of the bombings and led the 19-year-old Dzhokhar Tsarnaev down the path to terrorism. And Jeb Bush reiterated his support, according to CNN, for Puerto Rico's statehood today, telling a crowd that he's long been a backer of the movement to make the U.S. territory the 51st state. The former Florida governor and likely presidential candidate made the comments during a string of public events on the Commonwealth, where he spent months campaigning for his father, George H.W. Bush, during his failed 1980 presidential campaign. Yeah, just like Jeb, the rotten core supporter Bush, to support something that's going to screw up something. Like, in this case, not to make a joke out of it or anything, but at the very least, it would screw up that 50 Nifty United States song. You remember that one from 13 Original Colonies? Da-da-da-da-da.
He just wants to mess everything up. Wow, well, well. That's why he's a
yeah, anyone that supports the rotten core is rotten to the core, I say.
I say so, too.
And that's what I've got in national news. I'll go ahead and toss it to you.
Thank you very much on that, Corey. A brief look at international news headlines tonight. The Nigerian military says it has rescued 200 girls and 93 women from an area where the Islamic militant group Boko Haram is active. However, it said the girls abducted from a school in Chibok in April 2014 were not among them, unfortunately. The military said the girls and women were free during operations ending in the seizure of 4 Boko Haram camps in the Sabasha forest. Military spokesman said they are now being interviewed. Weapons were also seized at the camps, which were taken in the latest operation, according to the military. Pentagon officials say the U.S. is monitoring a seizure by Iran of a Marshall Islands flagged cargo ship. The MV Mars Tides was moving through Iranian waters in the Straits of Hormuz, according to the Pentagon. Iranian patrol vessels fired warning shots across the bow of the boat, according to U.S. officials, saying branding the action as inappropriate. A U.S. naval destroyer has been ordered into the region to monitor the situation. After the warning shots, the ship complied with orders to go deeper into Iranian waters, according to a Pentagon spokesman. The ship was in an area recognized as an international shipping lane he went on. U.S. aircraft were also ordered to the area to observe the interaction between the Marmaris vessel and Iranian forces. Back here at home, the U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments today in a historic case that could legalize same-sex marriage nationally. Outside the court, protesters for and against rallied with signs, music, and preaching, reflecting the deep and sometimes bitter national divide, at least according to some. Inside, the proceedings were interrupted by someone shouting that the justices would burn in hell if they were to back gay marriage. Currently, 36 out of the 50 states here in the U.S. allow same-sex couples to marry. Based on their questions, the 9 justices appear divided on the issue. The court is also determining whether to require states to recognize marriages performed in other states. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our news brief of the headlines from across the world tonight. Now it's time for tonight's Lawsuits Across America.
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Thank you. As always, ladies and gentlemen, please be seated and come to order. Lawsuits Across America is now in session. First item on the docket, a statewide gun rights group and a father with children in the Ann Arbor schools are suing the school district over its new policies that ban firearms on school grounds. This, according to the Detroit Free Press, the lawsuit filed in Washtenaw County Circuit Court comes just as a crowd of about 500 gun rights advocates are expected Wednesday at the annual Second Amendment March around the Capitol building in Lansing. After hearing speakers, the crowd of pistol packers customarily stride into the chambers of state lawmakers. The lawsuit challenges the Ann Arbor School Board's 3 rulings on April 15th. Policy 5400 lets the superintendent close schools and cancel events if staff see any dangerous weapons, including a handgun. Policy 5410 designates all school property as dangerous weapon and disruption-free zones. And 5420, no one possessing a dangerous weapon, including a handgun, can be on school property, with exceptions being police officers or individuals handpicked by the superintendent. So, ladies and gentlemen, get to know their superintendent. You're going to need it. With less than a month until graduation, Paul Nungesser, the Columbia University senior accused of raping another student, who later carried around her mattress in protest, has filed a sexual discrimination lawsuit against the school. This update from Newsweek. Nungesser's attorneys say that by allowing his accuser, Emma Sulkowicz, to receive course credit for her highly publicized protest, the school violated Title IX, a 1972 law mandating that federally funded education programs cannot discriminate against people based on sex. The attorneys named Columbia University, its president Lee Bollinger, the school's board of trustees, and visual arts professor John Kessler, who advised Sulkowicz on her mattress project as school against Nungesser. One, a former girlfriend, said she had felt like she could only see him if she had sex with him, though she never alleged physical coercion, violence, or rape, according to last week's filing. The other said he had grabbed her at a party and tried to kiss her. Columbia sided with Nungesser for the unwanted kissing complaint and terminated an investigation into the other report due to a lack of sufficient information. It was not only... And it was not only a protest, but also an art project, and she received thesis credit for it. The image of her dragging around the mattress drew media attention, and soon Sulkowicz became the face of the movement to combat sexual assault on college campuses. She appeared on covers of New York Magazine and the New York Times, penned an op-ed for Time, attended Obama's State of the Fart address as a guest of New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, and traveled to other schools for speaking engagements. The Columbia Student newspaper published Nungesser's name, and it soon became widely known. Yeah, to think that this girl has appeared at the State of the Fart address. You can tell she's bad news. Mm-hmm. And a federal judge has dismissed a lawsuit by a Connecticut father who said a baseball Little League demoted his 9-year-old son to a lower-level team because of the father's plans to build affordable housing next to a former league official's home. This from the AP. U.S. District Judge Victor Bolden in Bridgeport threw out the lawsuit on Monday, saying Christopher Stefanoni didn't prove any allegations in the lawsuit he filed in 2013 against the Darien Little League and its officials. Lawyers for the Little League called the lawsuit baseless. Stefanoni said his son was demoted in 2010 just days after he filed an affordable housing app for property next to the home of a former league official. The league's lawyer said an error was made in placing the boy on a higher level team, and the mistake was corrected by moving him to a lower level team. Stefanoni said Tuesday that he planned to appeal the ruling. He said it was difficult to prove such a case when the court demands proof of the secrets and whispers of rich white people behind closed doors. Gotta love how they say all that sort of stuff just to make people work harder just to get one little claim handled. And on that note, I declare today's lawsuits across America case dismissed.
Corey Evan with tonight's lawsuits across America. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't often start the entertainment report here on the Evan Miller Report, but like to start off tonight's Evan Miller Report entertainment segment with a bit of a movie review. I went a bit earlier today to the local theater today to see the movie that stars Blake Lively and Harrison Ford, The Age of Adaline today.
Oh boy, I can't wait to hear this.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I enjoyed the film. It was a little mix of sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. And as I have stated off-air with my co-host Corey Evan, I'm not often a romantic type of guy, but this film was actually a good film. Great film. I would suggest taking maybe your teen to this. This may not be for young kids, but historical in nature about young Adaline who gets in a car wreck, and of course there is some little science in this, and we sometimes may get the little Agenda 21 issue confused in there, but you don't hear anything about billions of years or anything about evolution in that regard, so I still think it's a good movie, but it's about Adaline who somehow gets in a car wreck, gets struck by lightning, or at least the vehicle that she crashed in gets struck by lightning, and she does not age. And it fast forward to current present time, and she's trying to handle a relationship with her now older and elderly daughter, and trying to handle her old boyfriend, who is Harrison Ford's character. I'm trying not to give too much away, but ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for a very good flick, that is entertaining and a bit historical at the same time. It brings you through the parts of when the Golden Gate Bridge was being built up in San Francisco, mentions the gold rush, the Great San Francisco earthquake, World War II was mentioned, archived video of historical events was played in the film. I think a very, very good film to go see. I don't often recommend people to go see films, but The Age of Adaline, a good film to go see, so I suggest upcoming this weekend, if you have some time, take your kids, that being your teens, take them over to have a look at this film. It's a great film. I highly recommend it. And now I send over to Corey Evan, who has the rest of tonight's entertainment headlines. Corey?
If it's based in California, I may just check it out one of these times. But at any rate, Bruce Jenner, forgive me for going into the dude looks like a lady file again, but she, I guess it is now, has threatened to sue the New York Daily News after publishing a grainy photo of her wearing a dress. She now identifies as a woman. The photo also appeared in a segment on CNN. The former Olympian, who revealed last Friday that she identifies as a woman, was photographed at his home in Malibu, clad in the striped maxi dress while holding a smoky. The photo appeared in the cover of the April 22nd issue of the tabloid just 2 days before his highly touted ABC interview with Diane Sawyer. Jenner alleged the images in the newspaper and on CNN, which were distributed by the photo agency X17, violated his privacy because they were taken from a great distance with a telephoto lens. The photo has also been scrubbed from, in addition to not being sold by X17 anymore when from the illegally, it's also been scrubbed from the Daily News site, but thanks to the indelible nature of the internet, images of the tabloid cover are still readily available online. As you know, in California, you can't use a telephoto lens to capture images of personal or family activities. That's a privacy law, my friends. But of course, Bruce's lawyer, Marty Singer, has told Page 6 Quote, the photos were clearly unlawfully taken from a very long distance using an enhancement device. He didn't immediately respond to the Times' request for comment. And I will let you know quickly that Sam Smith had a difficult announcement to make this morning. After suffering a hemorrhage on his vocal cords, the singer was forced to cancel his upcoming Australian tour. Smith is in Sydney right now, and he was scheduled to play shows tonight, Thursday and Friday, and Monday. After that, he was expected to perform in Tokyo on May 7th. Quote, I've been vocally exhausted for a while now, but this kills me, he posted on his Instagram. So I wish Mr. Smith a quick recovery on this one. And I'll go ahead and call that today's entertainment report. I hope to entertain you again tomorrow. By the way of stock market numbers, we forgot to do the business report in there, but I'll just quickly give you the stock markets. The Dow was up 72 points at 18,110. The Nasdaq down almost 5 points at 50.55. And the S&P 500 up almost 6 points at 21.14. Bit of a mixed bag. And this cooling consumer and buoyant consumer confidence puzzling economists and investors. The clash is over for now, and optimism has suffered. That from Bloomberg. And on that note, I'll send it over to Jason. Have a good night, Jason.
Thank you very much, Corey. You have a great night as well. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight. I hope you learned something from tonight's conversation with Lonnie Poindexter. Many thanks for him coming on to talk extended interview on the situation in Baltimore. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Evan Miller Report for this Tuesday, April the 28th, 2015. Coming up next, after the weather with the BBC's Nick Miller tonight, will be the Exceptional Conservative Show. He has breaking news regarding that situation in Baltimore on the death of Freddie Gray. For all of us here at the SHR Media Network, we wish you a great night and hope to talk to you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.
Around the far southeast of the USA, Alabama into Florida in particular, close to this area of low pressure. Things begin to improve during Wednesday as that starts to slip away. High pressure builds across much of the USA and Canada, just leaving eastern and western parts seeing some wet weather, but California is still very dry. Let's take a look at things then in terms of temperatures. Well, getting a bit warmer through central portions. It's milder in the northeast of the USA. That, though, isn't going to last. Here's Wednesday's detail in terms of where the rain and some snow is. High elevations of British Columbia. A few showers into the Pacific Northwest of the USA. They're going to clear away. California is dry, and there's still a lot of heat around across southern areas. Where we've had those storms down towards the southeast, well, some improvement again during Wednesday, but still some wet weather to be had, particularly coastal areas of Georgia to South Carolina, but more of Florida is dry at this stage. Still the risk of those strong storms into the far south and Florida Keys. In Montreal, temperatures remain around 13 Celsius, 55 Fahrenheit. It's turning cooler later this week again in New York after the showers. The sun comes back to Atlanta, and we'll have fair skies in Portland and perhaps a little bit cooler in LA.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.